the possibility of those things are really small, but my recommendation always with an application is even if it raises a small red flag, you don't want any red flags.
We are live. Welcome. We're at Ask the Dean. I believe last week we said it was episode 7, but it wasn't. It was 8. So today, July 20th, if you're here live, is episode 9 of Ask the Dean. For those of you that have been here before, you know, but for any newly initiated, today we're going to spend the next 45 to 50 minutes with Dr. Ryan Gray and Dr. Scott Wright. And anyone who has pre-ordered MAPT is attending this live. So for that special group, you guys can ask your questions and we'll answer them live. If we've got time, we get to them all, which often we do, not always. And then this will go out on a replay in a couple weeks so that all premeds can benefit from the wisdom today. And as always, we have a few questions that came in advance, so we can start there if we want.
Awesome.
Dr. Gray, Dr. Scott, how are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Rachel, thanks for having us on Ask the Dean.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a guest on our own show.
Yeah, right.
It's all right. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Well, I always liked it up behind the scenes so I can chat with students. So I'm going to pop off screen here for a minute. But if you guys want to start with our hot topic, we got a question that's too long to fit on the screen. But we have a pre-med who is, let's say, out of college for 10 years or so. He says he's in his 30s. And is very worried about whether or not he has the unique experience he believes justifies being an older pre-med.
Ooh. I love these questions, Scott.
Yep.
The students who worry about being unique enough.
Yes.
What's your initial thought when you hear that?
Well, my initial thought is we're all unique.
Yep.
We all have our own set of circumstances, our own personalities, our own goals and desires. We are all unique in many different ways. And I think pre-meds worry about this way more than they should. I think that this particularly comes up in the personal statement and other essays related to the application, where they want to say something unique and they want to say it in a unique way. And my words to that are, give it up. It's all been said, it's all been read. So, you have to just tell your story. And so with this particular person who's worried about how he or she states it as ageism, I think that what you have to do is just tell your story. What you're worried about is the person asking the question says, basically, I don't necessarily have a reason why I'm an older student. I wasn't in the military. I haven't, done anything that was spectacular in my 20s. I just kind of didn't do anything right and struggled and a little hustling and barely surviving, he says. And what, I think the key here my experience is there's not an ageism issue in medical school. There is an issue related more specifically to why do you want to do this and why now? Yep. That's the issue. And so I think that people who are not traditional in terms of their pathway into medicine have to answer that question straight on and just be honest about where this is coming from. Where is Ryan, as you put it in your book, the seed? Where is the seed? And then you talk about the seed, and then you broaden that to talk about what this is all about to you, and where's the motivation and the continuing impulse and stuff like that. So I think I wouldn't worry about it. And I tell this story often that when I was at UT Southwestern as the director of admissions, we had a young applicant who we accepted. And the day that she started, ironically, the day that she started medical school was her birthday. And she turned 50 that day. And she ended up being the president of her class all 4 years, and graduated with great, great fanfare, and is now went through residency and is now out practicing medicine. She was not only 50, but she was a single parent with teenagers. So this lady had some gumption about her, and that's what I think medical school admissions committees want to see: is, do you have the fire? Where's this fire coming from? And then tell your story. And if your story is, as this guy put it, I was struggling and hustling my way through my 20s, then you say that. And you may be saying it a little bit different wording, but you say it, and you just say, "Hey, I finally got my head screwed on right, and now I want to do this." That's always been my advice to students: is just be honest and just tell the story the way it goes. And you're not gonna. 30s is no big deal, particularly. I mean, I have a lot of applicants who talk to me who are in their 40s and 50s, and they are the ones that really worry about it. 30s, this is no big deal.
No big deal. Yeah,
Right.
it's funny, and this is where I try to hammer home as often as possible how to critically think through what we see as data. Right? The AAMC puts out all of this data, but it's not interpreted in any way. It's just data. Right. And so a student can look at that, a non-traditional student can look at that and go, wow, older applicants don't get in nearly as often as younger applicants. So therefore, it's ageism, we're disadvantaged. I'm like, well, no, the numbers don't tell you anything. And the numbers are just numbers, right?
Right.
Maybe the more non-traditional applicants are the ones who are kicking the can down the road every year because they're just not sure, right? I don't know if I want to do this. And that comes across in their personal statement in an interview. And of course, a medical school is not going to accept a student who really isn't sure that this is what they want to do. So just be careful looking at those numbers and in trying to interpret from them the story behind all of it, because there's just so many variables. But you hit the nail on the head at the beginning, right? There's what I say is, like, short of curing cancer, there's nothing that you're going to do that's going to make you unique, right? It's been done before. What makes you unique is the lens that you see the world through, right? The parents that you had, the grandparents that you had, the siblings that you had, the best friends that you had, where you went to elementary school, where you went to middle school. All of the experiences that you have lived have shaped your perspective and make you unique because of that. And now you tell your story based on that. So,
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely good stuff.
Ooh, when calculating GPA, what is considered freshman, sophomore, etc.? Are these based off of credit hours? So, Mr. Former Executive Director of TMDSAS, how did TMDSAS do this?
Self-reported. So the student puts in, when they put in their courses, they indicate when I took this course.
Yep.
Was I a freshman? Was I a sophomore? There's nothing beyond that. They're just wanting to get a sense of, and what you're putting in is a particular semester. And that's really a much more important identifier than whether you were a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior. They're putting in a semester, the semester of, let's say, 2014, or the spring of 2014, or the fall of 2015, or whatever. And that's what's tracked by the admissions committees in terms of getting a sense of trends and stuff in the GPA. There's also, and I think it gets a little bit more complicated now because so many students come in with hours that they took, for example, dual credit in high school that they took, let's say, at a local community college or whatever. And so that is denoted, at least at TMDSAS, as PF, or pre-freshman. So they took it pre-freshman, and then it's really left up to the student to identify what they consider to be their freshman semester, junior, senior, whatever. Yeah. So a student, for example, that comes in with what would not be unusual is for a student to come in with 30, 40, maybe even more credit hours that they took dual credit. And so they're really coming in as sometimes sophomore or even a junior into the calculated in terms of the credit hours. But it's really left up to the student in terms of them to enter that. So I wouldn't fixate on that as an applicant. Just make your best effort at identifying what you think you were at the time, and then if the application service, whether it's AMCAS or whatever, in terms of processing your application, has questions about it, then they'll make some alterations to it to make make it make more sense, or they'll contact you and say, we're unclear about this.
Yeah, I think the way that AMCAS specifically does it is they go based off of credit hours. And so after X number of hours, you're now a sophomore. After X number of hours, you're now a junior. After X number of hours. And that's why I review a lot of applications, and you'll see like 30, 60, 90, right? 30 hours as a freshman, 30 hours as a sophomore, 30 hours as a junior. And then it's like 70 hours as a senior, because of all the extra hours just get added in as a senior, unless they're post back and other stuff. So really at the end of the day, that it doesn't really matter. Just put it in and it'll figure it out for you.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love gap year questions.
If I take a gap year or gap years, how should I navigate my med school application with the Pre-Med Health Advising Committee, especially the committee letter and letters of rec sent by my professors, etc.?
Yeah, this is a really good question, especially for students who take a longer than one gap year. And the answer to this question is going to vary a little bit by undergraduate institution in terms of how that gets worked out and what the policies of that advising office are related to alumni. When I was at UT Dallas, and we served everybody. So if they were alumni, if they were current students, whatever, it didn't matter how long they were gone, we would allow them to go through the process, et cetera. So it was seamless, and it wasn't a big deal. I would suspect that that's going to be most undergraduate institutions, but check with your pre-med advising office to see what their policy is with regard to alumni in terms of how they serve them. Now, in terms of committee letter, and that's going to really address the committee letter. The issue, the bigger issue here are the individual professor or other letters that are going to come in on your behalf to the advising office to be a part of the committee letter. And I would recommend that if you're going to take one gap year, then I would say the best thing to do is not to get a letter a year in advance. Keep in touch with that professor. Keep in touch with that doctor that you shadowed or that you did clinical work with. Keep in touch with them. Let them know what you're doing during your gap year. Every month or two, send them an email and say, hey, things are going great here in wherever you are, and this is what I'm doing, and just let them be participating in what you're doing. You may not get a response, but at least they're aware of who you are, what you're doing, and then they can that next year when you're finishing your gap year, you can request that they send the letter to the advising office. You don't want old letters, and I would say a year-old letter is an old letter. You want to have current, up-to-date letter, like this is fresh off the press, coming to the committee, and that's not a problem. Multiple gap years, really same kind of advice and stuff. I think that's not as frequent to have multiple gap years, but it does happen. I think a one year gap year is not the norm, but it's certainly not unusual these days. And so lots of students will do a gap year for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
And
when you're talking letters of recommendations in terms of recency, are you talking about, like, if I get a letter recommendation November of 2020, but I'm applying in 2021, should the letter be dated 2021, or is it within a year?
Well, my recommendation is always to have the year of your application be the year of the letter.
Yep.
And so, and what you can do with that, let's say Dr. Smith wrote you a letter in November of 2019, and here we are in July of 2020. All you have to do is go back to, because the likelihood is that Dr. Smith has it on his computer somewhere.
Mm.
And all you have to do is say, hey, Dr. Smith, I really appreciate you writing this letter. It's awesome. You know, I thank you so much for your confidence in me, whatever. Would you mind updating your letter? All you would need to do is put the current date on it and resend it for me. I just want to make sure everything is like snap on target and dated well, and and they're going to totally understand. And unless it's a real jerk of a professor, then it's not going to be a problem. That's my recommendation.
What is I want to dig deeper on this because it comes up all the time.
Yeah.
What is the perception when a student applies with a letter that's a year or two old, at least dated a year or two old? What is the perception there?
So I think there's two possible perceptions that can happen. One is, have you totally lost track of this professor? How close were you really with them? How well do they really know you? If you don't, if you're not keeping in touch with them, that's one. The second one is maybe the professor changed his mind and won't write you another letter or won't do it anymore. Maybe you made him mad, or he discovered something about you that he didn't like, and blah blah blah. So I think the possibility of those things are really small. But my recommendation always with an application is, even if it raises a small red flag, you don't want any red flags in your application. Mm-hmm. So I would say, even if it's a little thing, if it takes one email and then the professor re-uploading the letter, that's an easy thing to do, not a problem. And and particularly if you if you run into issues with it, your advisor might be able to help with talking to the professor and saying, oh, look, we're just, we really advise students not to have year-old letters or whatever. So, if you do that, if the professor doesn't seem to understand why this is a big deal, you can often use the advising office to help you with that.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Yeah. Awesomeness. So here's another one. No, go ahead.
Where'd it go? I'm trying to find unique aspects. Oh, here we go with the unique again. Unique aspects to a school that may not be available on their website or on MSAR. What is the best way to discover hidden gems in schools? I was thinking about hunting down current students, but it has been hard to find students at specific schools. So I'll start with this one because I actually did a YouTube video, not a YouTube, a Facebook Live a while ago, I believe, about kind of hidden ways, basically this, right? Unique ways to find information. And it's why in Mapped, if you actually go to the school directory, the med school directory in Mapped, we have links to all of the social media there, as much as we can find. Because I think that's where the hidden gems are. I love, number one, going to a YouTube channel, right? Go to the school's YouTube channel and see what they're posting. A lot of it's going to be some boring stuff, some professors talking about their research and other stuff, but there may be some unique experiences on there that you can find. A little fun secret thing is you go to Instagram and you search based on location, and usually the schools are a location. And then you can see the students who are at that school posting and tagging their school, and you can kind of check out the vibe of the school and the campus and everything else is another fun little secret. But really, the biggest thing finding students is unfortunately, this is one of the places where I recommend going to Student Doctor Network. I don't think Reddit has these specific threads, but Student Doctor Network has school-specific threads, and you go on that school-specific thread, and you go and ask questions, and go and read, and just check out what's going on.
And take it a little bit with a grain of salt.
With a grain of salt, usually, because the ones that are the most unhappy are typically the ones that are going to be posting.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. But don't become a Facebook stalker.
Why not?
Well, you don't want to end up in jail. Number one.
What do you mean by Facebook stalker?
No, I'm sort of just kidding about that, but you don't want to try to really track down, as the question asks it, track down students, and then all of a sudden start barraging them with questions and everything, and the student is like block, and then they go to their admissions officer and say, there was this weirdo that was,
Let me ask you that, because we live in a day and age where access to people is almost kind of just, it's super easy, right? You go to their social media and you can private message, right? The most famous celebrity in the world, whoever that is, I don't know. But you can quote unquote slide into their DMs, right? Doesn't mean they're going to respond to you, but you could. And so I'm assuming that it probably happens quite often that somebody Googles, okay, director of admissions at UT Southwestern back in the day. Oh, Dr. Wright. Oh, look, I found his Facebook page. Let me send him a private message.
Yeah.
Right? That's not kosher.
Not good idea. No, not a good idea. Yeah. I think you have to be, socially aware and emotionally intelligent when you're doing these kind of things to not become a real pest in the process of it. And so I like what you said about the threads on SDN, or if Reddit has something or whatever, that where you can just, kind of listen to what they're saying and try to get a sense of the vibe and stuff, and perhaps chime in, but you definitely don't want to end up getting reported as some sort of really odd thing. That would be bad.
What about LinkedIn? LinkedIn is this kind of special social network that's more professional. What if I'm a pre-med student? I have a LinkedIn. It's super professional looking.
Yep. Can
I connect with, using LinkedIn lingo, connect with the director of admissions at a medical school I'm interested in?
I mean, you could. They may or may not allow. They may or may not accept your connection or whatever. How that phraseology works for LinkedIn. I've had a few of those in the past that have come up like that. I've typically not allowed them to connect with me, and I usually try to keep LinkedIn as kind of a professional colleague to colleague kind of experience. But I think probably a few have snuck in here or there, but I would say, just be, wise. And one of the things I would suggest is just bring it up again to your advisor or to maybe a professor or friends that you trust their judgment on, and just say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Don't just in your own mind think about it and then do it. Bounce it off a few other people that you really trust, parents, uncle, whatever, whoever it is in your life that you really kind of connect with and trust their judgment, and see what they think. And then, then that'll at least give you a little bit of an idea of how you can move forward.
See if it passes the sniff test.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Cool. All right. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but just need to ask this. How is the teaching and learning environment adapted for DO residents? Wait. How is teaching learning environment adapted for DO residents? Is most of the residents are MDs? Oh, if most of the residents are MDs and the attending is also an MD. I understand that DOs use different techniques for assessment and so on.
I think you ought to address this one, Ryan.
Yeah, I'll address this. The only difference between MD and DO is OMM.
Yep.
It's the only difference. And so the better question,
and most DOs don't practice
most DOs don't practice OMM. Exactly. I've went on this rant. I've been on this rant. I actually had because I was feeling gutsy. He was the president-elect at the time of the American Osteopathic Association, Dr. Mayo. I had him on the Premed Years podcast, and I said, "Look, Dr. Mayo, love you. Just met you, love you." The DO philosophy of this holistic care, right, is baloney, right? All good physicians treat patients holistically. And he goes, 1,000%, of course, right? I'm not going to argue that. Where he made the distinction of holistic care and this holistic philosophy is that he believes that osteopathic medical schools integrate it into the curriculum better and earlier on than allopathic schools. So at the end of the day, physicians treat patients to what is known as the standard of care. We ask questions. We go through a history. We go through a physical that helps us collect data. We order labs and get imaging that helps us collect data to build a differential diagnosis, hopefully come up with the diagnosis, and then treat to the standard of care. The only difference is that osteopathic physicians have OMM in their toolbox, whatever you want to call it. So that's the difference. So an MD who is the attending with DO residents is going to teach exactly the same things. Yeah. A DO or an MD with a DO attending is going to learn all of the same exact things. All of that's the same because we're all treating to a standard of care. So there's no difference there at the end of the day.
Yeah. So you're exactly right. The answer to the question is DOs in an MD residency are not going to have any problems.
Yeah. And as of now, right, it's 2020. As of now, we've met that deadline to where all residency programs are single accreditation under ACGME. Yeah. And so DOs, MDs are all applying to and being accepted to the same residencies. There's no separate DO residency anymore.
Yeah. Yep. And my and just as an aside, my personal physician, my primary care doctor, is a DO, but did an MD residency, and love him. Fantastic, wonderful physician, very caring, and he has never manipulated me.
Yeah. But man, does he treat you holistically?
Oh, holy cow! Yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
Holy cow! Yeah,
all right.
Definitely.
What do we got? Rachel was so entertained by that question. She got distracted there.
No, our popcorn popping has come to a little bit of a lull.
Nice.
We did have one follow-up question to the conversation about finding insight into med schools. And you know how we have some users who won't post because of their their names are tied, so they won't come through. So it's not showing up in the chat, but somebody followed up to say, I've been told you should try to reach out to a dean if there's a med school you're interested in and try to build rapport. And I mean, you guys kind of touched on this already, but think about the numbers.
Yes.
How many hundreds and thousands of prospective students would be reaching out to that dean every year? And just ask yourself, if I were that person, would I want to try to build a relationship with every single potential applicant, not even applicant? Yeah. And odds are, even if you loved the idea in theory, you just wouldn't have the time.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you bring that up because the old premed episode that's going out this week on July 22nd as we're recording this is about reaching out to schools and asking those questions. And I'm a huge advocate to reach out to schools. Now, reaching out to a specific person, I probably wouldn't go and find a specific person, but the generic kind of admissions office email, phone number.
Yeah.
And really at the end of the day, I think where students go wrong with this technique, because I've been talking about it a long time, to advocate for yourself and build those relationships and connections, is students will go, hi, I'm Johnny. I'm just calling to introduce myself because I was told that's what I should do, right? And just like at the end of the day, wasting everyone's time instead of going, okay, here's my story, here's my situation, here's this school that I'm interested in. What super specific question do I have? Not that I made up because I know I need to reach out to them.
Yeah.
What question do I have after doing all of my own research that I can call and say, hey, you know what? I thank you for all of the information you put out there. I've looked at it all. There's one weird thing about my situation. I was hoping I could run by someone. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Is there a good phone number, email I can email, whatever, right? And really getting specific to your situation and that school, and not a hey, every school kind of email blast. I'm really interested. Can I build a relationship with you?
Yeah.
So I have a couple of interesting stories about that. Not completely related to what you just said, Ron. I agree with what you said. One year we had a student who was apparently very interested in our medical school.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
This student sent us something that he had worked on for clearly a long time. And it was a 8-page magazine all about him. And there were stories about things that he had done in middle school or the science fair project, or I mean, it was actually
a memoir.
It was amazing because, and we all like laughed about it and everything about how, wow, this kid really put some energy into this.
Or his mom.
And right. And so that was one thing. But my favorite story related to this was one year we got from an applicant who had not yet been awarded a interview. We got a letter in the mail, and in the letter was a 3x5 index card. And taped to the 3x5 index card was a matchstick, a real wooden matchstick. And in teeny tiny little letters, written on the shaft of the matchstick was UTSW and let's say Johnny equals the perfect match. And we all laughed about that too and everything, but at the end of the day, it didn't make any difference. I mean, the process was going to play out the way it was going to play out.
Yeah.
And so don't put tons of energy. I mean, it's one thing, yes, to be creative, but it's another thing to waste your time.
So here, let me ask you a question. So do you go like to the director of admission listserv and go, hey, did anyone else get a creepy matchstick? Right? A lot of students will ask that question, but like, how much communication is there between schools for either certain applications or just in general?
Now, I can tell you very specifically about Texas, there's a lot of it, lot of it. And we all know each other. We have known each other for many, many years. The dean of admission at, for example, the dean of admission at Texas A&M University Med School, he and I, our families have gone on, things together, and we've known their kids, and I've known him for 25 years, and so we are very close, and I think a lot of states are that way. There's a lot of deans of admissions that know each other, that go on vacations together, and so. Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of contact, and if you get something bizarre like that, now the irony of the perfect match student was we ended up interviewing and making an offer to that student. He did not come to our school. He went somewhere else. So in other words, what that meant was that was a bunch of bullshit. Yeah, that's exactly right.
And it's interesting. I talk to students about this all the time. Is we have this tool as applicants, this letter of intent, if a school will take it, and we don't want to ruin it by being selfish and sending a letter of intent to every single school that you've interviewed at, because guess what's going to happen is they're not going to take them seriously if students abuse them. And so Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
it's interesting,
That's right.
and I don't blame the student, right? Maybe at that moment in time, he's like, "Oh, I want to go to UT Southwestern. We're the perfect match. I live in this town. Blah blah blah. Whatever the situation was." It's not until a student goes and interviews at a school and interacts with the student and sees the culture and is on the campus and sees the facilities that they go, "Oh wait, no, I like that other school better,"
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's
sure.
why you don't want to dedicate yourself to one school unless you're super locked into that location for
Right.
family reasons, other reasons, etc. And not go over the top by sending a creepy match. No.
Yep. Agreed.
Whew. All right. I was just wondering if there's any more info about the single GME. Info about the single GME is going because it is happening this month. I just listened to your specialty stories talking about that. I don't have any other specific information. I don't think we're going to really know anything for a few years on how it's turning out and what the results are and how DO students are doing at the quote unquote MDs. That's the funny thing, right? As I say that, DOs have forever been allowed to apply to MD residencies. It's
Right.
the MD students who couldn't go to the quote unquote DO residencies.
Right.
It'll all be the same. I don't think at the end of the day there's a lot of information. I don't think there's a lot of questions that are going to need to be asked. Be like, oh, let's see how this is going, right? It's not like this single accreditation. The ACGME is brand new and they're learning all the, like they've been around, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, hey, we're just everyone's the same now, and so I don't think we're going to have to do a lot of data interpretation and research to see how things are going. It's just it's going to keep going the way it's going.
Agreed.
Oh, yeah. All right. Would taking part in a publication in a scientific journal, case study, make me more competitive applicant for a med school? Most people do research but never get publication. So I was wondering which is more desired on a medical school application. So that last question is confusing, right? Which is more desired, right? Because you can't get a publication without doing research.
You do research, right?
And and you're not going to get, not all researchers will get published. So
right.
When you were at UT Southwestern, however you were working with a rubric or whatever, were there bonus points? Was there extra cherry on top kind of stuff for, ooh, this person's published?
I think no, not necessarily. My feeling is because what you're dealing with is a process that at some level is quantitative, but at the end of the day, it's going to be somewhat qualitative in terms of how the admissions committee is going to talk about what they see in your application. And so, for example, with this question, I think what's more important is how you talk about the research that you've done and the publication that you had. If you talk about it, so a good example would be if you talk about, oh, I did this publication and it's awesome and it got accepted by this journal and blah, 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 and all this stuff, and you're like the fourth person in the list of the application, then, I mean, these people that are on these admissions committees are well-published people. They know what a fourth author means. You did some little stuff. And so if you talk about it as if you were the end all and be all of that research project and you're the fourth author, they're going to be like, what the, this student doesn't get it.
It doesn't connect.
Yeah. And now if you were first author or second author, but just it's all about creating meaning and being reflective of what you did and talking about what you did in a way that makes sense to these people who know what they're doing. Yep. And so I don't think that the question is a valid sort of illustration about how things work. It's not an either or thing. I think if you have a publication, that's great. Yep. If you don't, it's not a big deal.
Yep.
I agree with you that most applicants that do research are not going to get on some kind of publication. If anything, maybe they're on a poster presentation at some conference or whatever, and that's fine too. But just talk about it realistically, about what you did, but mostly focus on what did you learn out of that experience? What was it all about to you? And really, how did it change maybe how you felt about research? And you can even, I've seen applicants who at the end of the day said, I did this 6-month research project with so-and-so professor, and we got all the way through it. And we had a publication that I was third author on, and here's what I did in that publication. And what I learned out of that whole thing is I don't want to do research.
I don't want to do research. Exactly.
I'm not interested.
Yeah.
That's a totally good thing to say.
Yeah. I think this question reflects the general pre-med sentiment that we fight day in and day out, that this isn't a checklist.
Correct.
It's not like, okay, I need research. Great. Okay. No, I need research that will help me publish. Great. Okay.
Right.
And right. I could sign up for my pre-med club at the university freshman year and go every meeting and sit in the back room and do my homework during the meetings and say, oh, look, I have 300 hours of pre-med membership but no impact, no meaning, no nothing, right? It's your kind of the what and the so what, right?
Right.
Right. And then the whole publication game is really that. Not all research is going to lead to a publication. The timing of it is so specific. You may come in year 2 of some very important research, stay for 2 years, and the research's not going to get published for another 2 years, and your name's not going to be on it. But what you did was impactful to you and your vision of what research is. And no, you didn't end up on the publication as an author, but that's okay.
It's a valuable experience. Yeah.
I think students think admissions committees are dumb. And they're like, okay, look, I'm a first author. Well, they know that public like researchers will play the, hey, you're a pre-med student. I know that first person publication, first author on a publication is going to help you. So I'm going to give it to you. Right. Yeah. They know that game too. So,
well, and they also look, I think that admissions committee members are also very savvy in looking up, if it's a journal they've never heard of before, or if it,
maybe look back, like, this is a shell corporation for this student.
Maybe it's out of their field, and so they don't know, they've never heard of it, but they'll research it and they'll say, well, it's not peer reviewed, or this or that, or whatever. And so, they're pretty smart about stuff like that. I remember we used to have an admissions committee member who, one of the things he loved to do was if we had a student that in their application indicated they're disadvantaged, he loved to Google their address. Mm-hmm. And he could check and see what's the appraisal value of their house, where's their house located, what kind of neighborhood is it in. And so often he would bring that up in the admissions committee. He would say, this student says they're disadvantaged and they live in an $850,000 house on a lake in blah, 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 whatever. And we would have other admissions committee members who would say, well, but, he may have grown up really poor and his father won the lottery, or, you never know. But he loved to do that because, a lot of students will really, try to, slide something under the rug when it comes to
and as you said, right, it's not to say that you can't mark disadvantaged if you live in a nice house, but be prepared potentially
to answer
to
the
be
question.
Called out and go, you know what? Yeah, I'm really blessed. The last couple of years, my mom's worked really hard and has a great job, and we moved recently, whatever. Yep. And here's my situation and why I put disadvantage, right? Being able to back that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
What else?
I think we have some folks listening who are taking you literally and now worried that you're talking about learning differences. And that's not the kind of disadvantage you meant just now.
No. Yeah,
just to clarify.
We're talking about economic disadvantage.
Yeah.
Yes, and it was just an example.
Yeah.
Just an
So
example.
on just to get into the specifics, AMCAS specifically, does TMDSAS ask for disadvantaged
Yes.
status?
Yep.
So AMCAS, TMDSAS, ACOMAS does not. I know specifically they do not. But AMCAS has a disadvantaged essay that you
Yeah,
can say, do you
same here.
consider yourself disadvantaged? You get
And why?
1,325
Yeah.
characters, and then you answer why.
Yeah, exactly.
To dive into that.
Exactly.
I think I did.
General rule of
episode
thumb,
of
guys,
Premed
is we're
TV on
giving you advice that we want you to extrapolate.
Yeah, never take literally.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. Canada.
Use guys.
Canada. I think I may move to Canada soon.
I know. Maybe later in November. Anyway, go ahead.
Any tips for Canadians applying to the U.S. as our clinical opportunities are far and few? Do schools take this into account? So it's interesting, right? You being from the TMDSAS world, the Texas world, you probably have very few Canadian applicants applying.
Correct. Well, and those that we did typically have were Canadians who went to U.S. Undergraduate institutions.
Yeah. The Texas, just for people listening later on in a podcast or watching this on YouTube, the general the thought behind this, the thought behind the question is, in Canada, in a lot of provinces, you're not allowed to shadow, or in at least one province, you're not allowed to shadow. So shadowing is much harder. The privacy rules are much stricter. And so shadowing clinical experience is much harder to come by. And it's less for Canadian medical schools. It's far less relied upon or used in the application process. And it's different here in the States. And it's interesting. I'd love to find out why that is. I was actually connected with someone in Canada earlier today, so I may have them on the podcast later.
That'd be awesome.
But really the question comes down to, okay, in Canada, I can apply to and get into a Canadian medical school without much clinical experience, with zero shadowing, just because it's not expected. But it is expected in the U.S. So how do I overcome that, number one? And number two, if I can't overcome it and I apply to the U.S., will a U.S. admissions committee see that I'm Canadian and go, oh, wait, yeah, they're different. We're not going to expect them to have the same amount of clinical experience in shadowing?
My sense would be no. Now, maybe that's true.
No, as in they won't expect that, or no, as in they won't like that?
No, no, as in I don't think they're going to be able to sort of skirt around that and say, well, because I think that it at some level it is a competition, and I hate to use that word, but you are competing against other applicants for a place in the class. And when you just there you go. Now, once you're in medical school, it becomes collaborative. But there is this level of competition, and what you're having to do is show that you know what you're getting into and that you know what you're doing. And if a Canadian comes into it, they have no experience in the American healthcare system. Canadian healthcare system is different, and so the expectation is going to be that you know what you're getting into by getting into an American medical school and what the American healthcare system looks like, and behaves like in a somewhat one first hand way. So my sense would be no, that you're not going to just be able to say, oh well, I'm Canadian, sorry, I don't have that part. So no, I that would not be my sense.
Right. It's almost the exact same, to kind of come full circle here at the end, the discussion earlier about non-traditional students and why they're potentially not getting in. It's like, well, just because you say you want to go to medical school doesn't mean you have the experiences to show that you know what you're getting into, and you've been able to reflect on those experiences to really prove to the medical schools that this is what you want. And so it's the same thing for Canadian applicants. And that's really my biggest question is, how are Canadian medical schools what are they relying on?
Yeah. good
Are they
question.
are they looking for good people?
Mhm.
And that's my assumption, right? Here in the States, because we're so ass backwards with everything, right?
Mhm.
We have our private health insurance and we have tuition that is skyrocketing out of control. And we have to make sure that physicians know what they're getting themselves into. And we have to make sure that they really know that they want to be in
Right.
clinical medicine and take care of patients. Well, part of that isn't because medicine is so super unique, but part of that is because, well, here in this country, you're going to come out with lots of debt and you're going to come out to a dysfunctional healthcare system.
Yep.
And are you prepared for all of that dysfunction and stress and debt and everything else?
Yep.
Whereas in Canada, they are better able to choose for traits of physicians, like being a good person and,
Right.
they have tons of volunteer experience outside of the hospital, just showing that they're a good person because tuition is low. And so they're coming out with a lot less debt. Their pay is very close to US pay. There was an actual article several months ago. It was like a physician group in Canada. It was like, don't give us a raise. We make enough money. Like, use the money for something else. I'm like, wait,
Wow.
what is
What
that?
the hell?
Yeah. And so
Right.
they're not coming out right. And every system has their issues and nothing's perfect, but they're much better than we are. And so they have less stress and less debt and blah, blah, blah. And so they don't have to truly make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into.
Right.
So,
Well, hence Casper was created in the Casper exam was created
Yeah.
in Canada. You know,
Casper, MMI.
yeah.
Because
And they're trying to pull out these characteristics.
these traits. Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, not have you spent enough time in a hospital to see how crazy everyone is
Yeah, right.
to know that you want to be part of that crazy.
Right.
Right? It's almost, we should almost do the opposite, right? Scott is like, anyone who wants to be president is disqualified because you got to be crazy to want to be president. And so if you want to be a doctor, like, you can't be a doctor because you got to be crazy.
Yeah.
We're gonna go to the homeless shelter and just go look at their roster, who's volunteered the most, and go, you're going to be an amazing physician. We'll teach you everything you need to know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, it's backwards, but
Absolutely.
it's the system we got. And we'll fight to improve it as much as possible. All right. Is that it for today?
Yeah, I think that's a good stopping point for us.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Might
Dr.
need a
Gray's
little
rant
silver
is a
lining
good
after that
stopping
storm cloud.
Yes. That's all right. What's the silver lining?
Well, I was just going to say, I think for any physician, the job is hard enough, right? Like, without the insurance and the crazy hospital system and whatnot. So I'm sorry that the system is so backwards, but I appreciate that we end up with such prepared physicians.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
think we're lucky in that regard.
We are indeed.
You guys go through a lot, you premeds, but we as a nation are lucky that we have doctors that aren't, going straight from high school to med school, for example. Like, I think those extra years of maturity and learning, even if they don't do anything for you for med school, it's just 4 more years of growing.
Yep.
Right?
Indeed.
But does that help? That's the question, right?
Probably
The
does
UK
for some,
that.
and doesn't for others.
UK
I
goes
think in
straight
this
from high
country
school.
where adulthood is starting later and later,
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't believe that age is directly tied to maturity, but I think life experience is usually pretty tied to maturity.
Yep.
So I have no problem with young doctors. I mean, I'm at the age where my doctors are usually younger than me, and I'm down with that. They learned recent stuff.
Yeah.
But I want to know that they're highly qualified.
Yep. Okay.
Agreed.
All righty. Another Ask the Dean in the books.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank
See you next week.
Take care.